Welcome to episode 5 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined in studio as always by my good friend, my teammate here at Grace College and Theological Seminary, the one, the only, John Sloat.
Matthew Scott, what's happening?
Well, we are now on the Tuesday after the Super Bowl. It's always a fun thing that we will obviously talk about.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit.
But first, we want to encourage people to reach out and connect with us on Twitter at V&S-Pod. Mm-hmm. And then people can also email us at Various and Sundry Podcast. That's all one word with no punctuation at gmail.com. And in fact, we had a listener email that we at least wanted to mention briefly.
Yeah, and who sent that email in?
That was from Chris in Indiana.
Okay, yeah, Chris from the from the home state here.
That's right. And we won't read the text of the email, but basically he asked for some suggestions for primary source materials from our discussion of church history from the previous episode. He noted that we mentioned several books, but none of them were like direct primary source materials, like if you want to read direct documents from church history. So I don't know if you had any suggestions when it comes to that area that we can recommend for our listeners.
Yeah, really, I do recommend Augustine's works. So City of God, it's quite thick. I think Confessions is a much more readable book.
That's probably an easier place to start than City of God, yeah.
Yeah, although City of God is quite good. I'm reading through it currently. It's been an adventure,
but it's a commitment.
It's like a 2-year commitment for me.
Yeah.
But other than that, I often find primary sources difficult to read, particularly if you're a layperson. If you're just a guy in the pew or a woman in the pew trying to work your way through church history, I might recommend some other books as well. One that came to mind, a classic, Evangelism in the Early Church by Michael Green.
Yeah, that's good.
Is one that I've used in my own church history course as I'm prepping for lectures and those sorts of things, and I believe you have a couple as well.
Yeah, so I think I know this was used as a textbook in my own church history coursework as a seminary student, but there's a book called Documents of the Christian Church that's edited by Henry Bettinson and Chris Maunder, I think is how you say his name, and basically they give snippets, selections from key writings from the early church, which can be super helpful. And then I think actually they go beyond the early church, beyond that into, I think, up at least close to the Reformation period, if not into the Reformation period. The second one is a 3-volume collection edited by William Juergens called Faith of the Early Fathers that has snippets from the early church fathers on different subjects. And so that's a good way if you're interested in what do the early church fathers think about a particular area. There's very good indexing and titling and such that it makes it easy for you to jump into that and track that down. And
then I also think because so much of the writing is so old that it's no longer copyrighted or anything like that, they're just available on the internet. Now you got to make sure you get a good source when you do that, but you can Google and find quite a bit of early church writings.
Yeah. So thanks to Chris for checking in here in the home state. And if you have some feedback or some questions for us that you'd like for us to address on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. So again, you can reach out to us, Various and Sundry Podcast at gmail.com. But since we are on the Tuesday after the Super Bowl, it's only appropriate for us to talk about, we'll start with the game first, and then we'll move on to other aspects connected with the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the game was a good game. It was an enjoyable game.
Yeah.
It was a close game. It had drama, some intrigue. The Chiefs came back from down 10 in the fourth quarter with, I believe, 7 minutes to go.
I think it was right. Yeah, maybe a few more minutes than that, but they were down 10, almost a third, and a half of the way through the fourth quarter. So yeah,
and came back and won,
and won by 11.
Won by 11. Yes,
which was, from what I understand, I think it was their third consecutive postseason game where they trailed by at least 10 points and then won by 10 or more points, which has never been done before in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, well, I think we watched that Houston Texans-Chiefs game early in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They were down 24 in the first quarter. The Titans, obviously.
Were they down 10 then, or 17? Maybe 17.
17, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that Chiefs defense stepped up in each of the second halves of those games and
Yes.
really put a lockdown on.
That's right.
On those teams.
Right. And I think that what it also shows is the fact that you, in today's NFL, if you have a superstar quarterback, you're never out of a game.
Yeah.
At least it feels that way. And with someone like Patrick Mahomes, it's clear that they can be down a lot. And with Mahomes plus his skill and speed on the edges with the receivers and Kelsey as the tight end, they are a nuclear explosion waiting to happen on offense that just any moment they could break out and score 21 points in 7 minutes.
Yeah, they started calling them the Legion of Zoom. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so the old Seahawks secondary was known as the Legion of Boom because they hit people, did all these things. They called these guys the Legion of Zoom because they were so fast.
Okay. So I think one of the things that also struck me is the fact that in light of my rooting interests, Nick Bosa on the 49ers had a good game, and he's just a beast to block. And but at the end of the day, it seemed like the difference ended up being the difference at quarterback. Garoppolo could not produce when it mattered in the fourth quarter, and those were some of the questions coming into the game. Could Garoppolo, if necessary, put the team on his back and lead the team to score in crunch time if necessary? And apparently, we found the answer, at least for this game, was he couldn't.
Well, and I think there's some play calling issues there on the 49ers as well. There was they were up 10, they had the ball, it was the fourth quarter, they ran the ball on first down and got 5 yards. The next 2 plays, they threw the ball. Mm-hmm. Big mistake.
Yeah.
And ended up punting away. Patrick Mahomes went down the field and scored a touchdown. They needed to run the ball a bit more in that fourth quarter to really start sucking time off the clock. And I think in part, I totally agree that Jimmy G could not pull it off.
Right.
But I think there was some poor play calling there as well.
Yeah, which is ironic when you think about the fact that part of what Kyle Shanahan is known for was the fact that he was the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons when they blew a 28-3 lead over the Patriots in the Super Bowl. That would have been 3 years ago.
Yeah, just a few years ago. Yeah.
And so for the second, his second appearance in the Super Bowl as a coach, this time as the head coach, there's again questions about play calling and strategy and that sort of stuff. So just interesting that here we are 3 years later, and although he wasn't the head coach of the Falcons at that point, there were play calling issues in that game that people have suggested that if they had done some things differently, they could have held on to that lead rather than blown it.
And it was a good Super Bowl. It was an excellent game. It was fun to watch. It did lack a signature play. Like, I don't think of any individual play that I go to that I'm like, that defined the game.
Well, I think maybe the Chiefs play down on the goal line where they did the choreographed dance move and then the direct snap to the running back for the
and that was
first
based
down.
on like a Rose Bowl play from the 1940s.
Yes.
I read
70s,
somewhere.
I think.
Was it 70s?
I think 40s is too far back, but 70s is still a ways back, which
is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there was a bit of controversy with the officiating end of the first half. George Kittle, their all-world tight end, gets loose downfield, pushes off just a little at least with his off arm to create space to catch the ball, flagged for offensive pass interference. If that play had stood, 49ers almost certainly would have scored at least 3 to go into the halftime up 13-10 instead of tied 10-10. And so, there was the controversy of, was that really pass interference? Was it dramatic enough? And of course, 49ers fans are losing their minds over this, and Vikings fans are like, Saints fans are like, excuse me, did you not see the play at the end of our playoff game a few weeks ago where basically you had the same level of push-off and no call on the game-winning touchdown? So
those were both first-half plays, though. There was no signature second-half play that led to one team winning. There was the beating of Richard Sherman in the end zone, sort of, and...
Well, you might be able to argue the 3rd and 15 conversion where Patrick Holmes threw it deep to Sammy Watkins. The ball was underthrown a little bit, but that was like a 40 or 50-yard play that if they don't convert on that, they're punting it back. They're still down 10, I think, at that point in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I was going to leave my Super Bowl party if they didn't convert that third down. That was a big third down play, but I can tell you that he caught the ball, he got the first down, but I can't say, oh my goodness, it was a one-handed catch, tiptoeing the sidelines or anything. It's not going to be on a Visa commercial in the coming years,
Okay.
And I think that's what I was looking for. I was
see.
looking for that signature play that I just didn't see.
Yeah. So also connected with the Super Bowl, obviously, we have commercials, which for
Love the commercials.
Some people those are even more exciting to them than what the game itself is.
And sometimes they're better than the game itself.
Sometimes.
Not this year.
Not this year. I think that when it comes to the commercials, to me it feels like there's been a downward trend over the past probably 3 to 4 years of just the quality and the number of commercials you're like, oh, that was really good, or I really liked that, or that was funny or entertaining. So we'll start with you. Were there any commercials that stood out to you?
Well, two. The first one is the Google commercial with the individual having struggling to remember his wife that you kind of can piece together has passed away, and he's struggling. What is communicated, or at least what I heard, was some kind of dementia he's really struggling with.
Yeah.
And so he's having Google remind him about his wife and all these things.
Yeah, that's a tearjerker right there.
And I get the commercial, and I had the feels, However, that's not what I'm looking for in a Super Bowl commercial. Like, I don't want this wide range. I want to laugh. I want to enjoy myself. I don't want to be like, all right, I think I need to call my grandpa. Or it says something like that. I'm not looking for those sort of feelings moments. I'm looking to laugh, and
right.
So it was a good commercial. It was tear jerking, but I'm looking to laugh.
Okay. So you just want to rule out the sort of not heartwarming, but the go for the jugular when it comes to jerking the tears.
Yeah, in my mind, the greatest Super Bowl commercial of all time was when the spaceship comes down and goodness, I'm trying to remember, the alien walks out and just says, "What's up?" to the people. I think it was, I can't even remember. Was it a Mountain Dew? It might have been a Bud Light commercial. I can't remember. But I remember being a kid and being like, that's hysterical, and dying. That's the pinnacle for me.
Okay. Well, and the other commercial I think that stood out to us, in part because of what we do.
Yeah.
Since we are both Greek instructors, Greek professors, was the New York Life commercial that based their entire 1-minute commercial on 4 different Greek words for love.
The last thing I was expecting to see at the Super Bowl was Greek letters on the screen.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, one of the first things that struck me as that commercial started was my thought of, they're totally ripping off C.S. Lewis here.
Yeah, and they did not cite their source.
They did not cite C.S. Lewis, yes. And so that was the first thing, like, wait a minute, 4 loves. I mean, among our people, so to speak, it's like, well, duh, C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis has a book called that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think, too, that, it's somewhat of an illustration of something we talk about in Greek class of a sort of kind of a word fallacy there of investing these individual words with all of this meaning when meaning is contextual, and it's not like in ancient Greek those distinctions are always so tightly adhered to and such. But I guess as a Greek professor, I shouldn't complain. They're actually, talking about Greek.
Yeah, we're relevant.
Exactly.
We're Super Bowl relevant.
That's right. That's what we do here at Grace College and Theological Seminary can prepare you for a position at a major marketing firm in order to produce a Super Bowl commercial.
That's right.
We should put that in the marketing for our blended program,
or at least the syllabus. Yeah.
Exactly. So, well, and you got anything else on the commercial thing?
I don't. There was one with Rainn Wilson who played Dwight in The Office that was very funny, but I can't even remember the company. But I remember laughing. But that was one of the few I laughed at.
I'll be honest, I just didn't pay a lot of attention to the commercials. Those two did catch my attention that we talked about, but I just get to the point where I feel like I said, that the quality has gone down, and there's also, again, it feels like there's such a culture now of not wanting to say something or do something that is overtly political, except for unless you're going to buy a political ad, which I think Trump actually had a political ad somewhere.
Trump and Mike Bloomberg, both had political ads, and they love each other.
Our resident billionaires.
Yeah.
So, in any case, when it comes to our main topic for today, as we talked about this is an area that we've had multiple conversations about.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about
I think this is something that we wanted to sort of take public in one sense by talking about this whole area of singleness.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this has been an area that you have done a lot of thinking about, a lot of reflecting on, a lot of reading about, and obviously some of your own personal experience informs your thinking and your views on this. So I don't know where you necessarily want to start with this topic.
Yeah, I think it's important to nail down our own context here.
Mm-hmm.
So if wherever you're listening, we're in central Indiana, north central Indiana, and we are at a liberal arts Christian college that we both love working at. We both really enjoy. You have been married since the age of...
Let's see, I was 22, got married in 96, hadn't turned... Yeah, so I was 22.
Okay, and I am currently 31 and unmarried, although that's changing, 4 months. So that's changing here...
3, almost.
We're just starting February.
You're not going to count that?
No, we're counting February as a month.
Okay.
4 months.
Okay.
But the Christian college we work at, which I think is par for the course for most liberal arts Christian colleges, is students tend to get married at 21, 22, 23, while the national average seems to tick more towards 30 for marriage.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure this isn't necessarily unique to Grace, but there's even a sort of comical saying that floats around campus, the ring by spring, the idea of by the time you are in spring of your last year here at school, there's sort of the, maybe not expectation is strong, but certainly a sort of, I don't know, what would you say, not expectation.
There's a pressure.
Yeah, maybe some at least subtle pressure.
And there's even a bit of a pressure to sort of couple up with, oh my goodness, we're part of the same friend group, we're both single. Maybe it'll work,
Yeah.
And to sort of step into that.
Sure.
And, I'm not sure that's the most healthy culture that we have. I think there are worse cultures we could certainly have. I think a caveat we want to put out there is that we do believe marriage is a good thing, that it is something ordained by God to be something that is good for human existence, and good for society as well. I was just thumbing through some of my singleness books as I was coming in here, and one of them says like the church treats singleness like it's the foundation of Western society, and I was like, it's very important.
Treats marriage like it's the foundation of okay.
Yeah, it treats marriage like it's the foundation of Western society, and I was going, it's a very important piece of society. Like it is a good thing for society. I think where we get ourselves in trouble, it's not an ultimate thing for society.
Yeah, and I think that when I when I think about this area, at least incidentally, it connects with one of my I don't know, hobby horses or soapboxes, but I would argue that marriage/family is one of the two most acceptable forms of idolatry in the evangelical church.
Absolutely.
The other one is ministry. Mm-hmm. But marriage and family is one of the most acceptable forms of idolatry. And what I mean by that is you can talk about and pursue marriage and family in such a way that you are making it an ultimate thing, like you're describing, in the context of evangelical churches, and it's unlikely that people will call you out on it or acknowledge it as, that's not good. That's actually sinful. You're taking something that's a good thing and making it an ultimate thing, which is one of the definitions of idolatry.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's a pretty major blind spot that churches, particularly in contexts like ours, Midwest, conservative, evangelical to the core, people tend to look at marriage and say, this is for everybody. This is for everybody, and it's for everybody now.
And I think there can be a tendency to look at singles in the church, and as they get older, to begin to subtly wonder, well, what's wrong with them if they're not married by, I don't know, pick an age, pick 25, pick 27, pick 30. Like, well, what's wrong with that person? That there seems to be, it may not be spoken, but this sort of unstated but kind of assumption of, well, there must be something. They seem like a great person, but there must be something that I don't know about, or that's just kind of off about them, that is the reason why they have not gotten married yet.
And I think that's particularly true for more women than men. Like I think men get some of that pressure, but I think women get that pressure a lot more than men do.
I agree. So I think that when you reflect on this area of singleness, what are some of the reasons that you think that it seems like culturally, and even I think some of this, it seems like there is this tendency even in our evangelical circles that either it's get married very early, like in college even, or like right after college, or the other, maybe not extreme, but the other end of that spectrum is that there's a growing number of singles in our evangelical churches who are single into their late 20s and into their 30s. So I'm curious if you have ideas as to maybe why that is. I mean, obviously at some level, it's the sovereignty of God. Okay, right. We believe in God's sovereignty. We believe He orchestrates things in His timing. But I think it's fair for us to look at, are there cultural trends? Are there theological trends? Are there economic trends? Are there societal trends that are contributing to these dynamics?
Yeah, and that's a big question and probably has a million answers. And I only have my own experience and sort of half-baked guesses to make.
But you've done reading in this area as well.
I have done some reading. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to hold you to the scientific standard of, I can cite journal articles that have, peer-reviewed blind studies of of the numbers.
Sure, and like we already said, I do think it is culturally more acceptable to be single longer,
Yes.
which a generation ago I don't think was the case.
Right.
So I think,
and in particular, I'd say for women,
in particular,
that
yes.
as society has changed and it's become more common for women to work and to work outside the home and to support themselves, that there's less of the perception, especially I think from a woman's perspective, of, if I don't get married, I'm not sure how I'm going to provide for myself. Like that is, I think, in many respects, not the case anymore.
Yeah, and I think there's more of a focus on career as well, and I think that's more available to women than it was a generation ago.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so I think there's some people that are that go to work and like, oh my goodness, I really enjoy this. I don't necessarily want to step away from this yet.
Right.
And start the family.
Okay.
So that's part of it. And then I think goodness, some of our cultural icons or some art, if I can call Friends art. That was formative for millennials was if you think of the TV show Friends, you have these 6 people who are all single for a majority of the show, who really thrive in life and are really like, one's a PhD, one makes their way in the business world. They all got these different things. One's a famous chef. All these things that are going on, and I think even though I don't think we would speak this, I think there's a part of us that looks at that and goes, that sounds really nice. And I think another thing that I think I'll use Friends to illustrate was, I think millennials have looked at previous generations and seen that rushing into a relationship or rushing into marriage particularly can have devastating effects. I mean, the divorce rate and those different things. And Friends, to illustrate this, Friends begins with one of the main characters slipping out the window of the bathroom at her wedding.
Right.
Escaping, coming to the coffee shop in New York City, and being with this new family, this group of friends.
Yeah.
And a few episodes in, her mom comes to talk to her and is talking about how proud she is of her, how independent she is, and just kind of look at her like, why are you saying this? Well, because I wanted the same thing, but I went through at the wedding. And so I think that illustrates that millennials that are still singles have in some sense looked at past generations, at the baby boomers, and seen, goodness, this was not good for the woman. This was not good for the man. This led to divorce and brokenness and broken families and struggles for children. And so they've kind of said, I'm going to hold off on this, and I want to be certain.
Right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely a factor in this whole conversation. As I thought about this area, I remembered a New York Times article that I read about, I forget his name now, but the guy who coined the expression FOMO, fear of missing out, also coined the expression FOBO, fear of better options.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it.
And so that came to mind as I was thinking about this topic of singleness, that I do wonder that at least this informs part of the discussion, I think. I'm not saying it's the exclusive, explanation. Sure. But I do think one of the characteristics of both millennials and even particular Gen Z that's coming after them, I think it's even more pronounced in Gen Z, is there is a fear of locking in and saying, okay, I'm going to go with this. In part because there's this fear of, what if a better option comes along? And I see it in simple ways, not far less life-defining situations, like even college students or later making plans for the weekend that's like 3 days away. So you come into this, well, and very non-committal. Why? Oftentimes because there's like, well, I want to wait till the last minute in the event that a better option comes along, and if I commit to that, I might miss out on something better that's coming along. And I do think that there can be a dynamic of that in the dating and sort of pre-marriage process of, well, I want to keep my options open in the event that someone even better comes along, and there can be a fear of locking into, well, if I lock into a lifetime commitment with this particular person, what if 6 months later I meet someone that I, in one sense, click with even better?
Yeah, and I think dating apps and those sorts of things have only heightened that, because it can seem for the millennial almost endless amounts of options. So I think that's absolutely true.
Right. So let's think maybe specifically about how can the church minister better to singles? Maybe we need to ask the question first of what are some of the common mistakes that churches make in trying to minister to, care for, incorporate into the life of the body this demographic in their midst of singles, and in particular, probably thinking of sort of mostly post-college or like college age up into realistically probably into the 30s.
Yeah.
Would you think is because I think typically once you get past the 30s, the number of people who are single who've maybe never been married before is not very high typically.
Typically, yeah.
So what are some of the mistakes that maybe you've seen yourself or in conversations with others or you know about?
Can I tell a story?
Sure.
So
it's your podcast.
Yeah. I need a validation. I was being picked up somewhere, and I'm going to keep this vague, but by the head of a denomination. And so we were getting into the car. First time I had ever met the guy. He reached into the back seat. He was in the front seat. I was in the back seat. He reached into the back seat to shake my hand, introduce himself. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't look me in the eye, but looks at my hand.
Okay.
Looking for that ring.
For the ring, yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, "You married?" First conversation we've ever had. "You married?" I said, No, I'm not. He goes, "You dating?" "Well, I've recently started seeing somebody." "Well, you should get married. You should get married immediately." And it was like, oh, wow. My goodness. Well, thank you for the advice.
Yeah.
Person
completely unsolicited.
Yeah, a person that I've heard of before, but I'm just meeting.
Yeah.
And so I think the church unintentionally can communicate that, you're single. You must struggle with loneliness. The answer to that loneliness is for you to get married.
Right.
And I don't know if they would come out and say that. Church members, some obviously would. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a pitfall that, oh my goodness, this marriage piece is for everybody in the church.
Right.
I think it's for a good portion of the church, but I don't think it's for everybody.
Right.
So that's one pitfall.
Or at least at one level, it may not be for that person at this point in their life.
Sure.
Right. That to assume that in that story, to assume that it would be the best course of action for you to get married quickly to a person that maybe you've just started seeing, or maybe there are issues in your own personal life that would be better addressed as a single person before you commit to a lifelong covenant relationship with another person who's a sinner. So to even assume that it's the best for that person right now, maybe it's not.
Yeah, in some ways that I think the church can really minister well to singles is to when preparing sermons, when preparing teaching, think about the different demographics in the midst of the church as it relates to people with parents, people with children, people with grandchildren, people who are unmarried, and be intentional about tailoring application in your sermons to those things. And then also inviting the single to be a part of things. One thing that I believe we have changed at our church is we have a church picnic every year.
Yeah.
And one of the things it says that they would put up there is basically, if your family's last name begins with this letter, bring this. If your family's last name begins with this letter, bring this. If your family's last name begins with this. And I always looked at that and I went like, oh my goodness. First of all, I don't have to bring anything because I'm just me. Right. But second of all, where do I fit in? Am I a part of this?
Yeah.
Am I invited to the picnic, or
Sure.
do I have to procreate in order to be invited? That was and so that was something
Sure.
I was able to pass on to our leadership, and I believe they just changed it to, if your last name is this,
right. Yeah. Let me cycle back for a minute to the preaching piece and the application piece. I think that this is, in one sense, a specific way of talking about a larger principle. But when it comes to application in preaching, I think that one of the ways that preachers can grow in that area, and this applies to tailoring application specifically to singles, is you have to know people in those categories, right? Yeah. That it's a lot harder to craft application for a single person if you really don't know any single people and the kinds of day-to-day experiences they have, the challenges, the joys, the priorities, all those sorts of things where you'd want to directly press in to their lives when it comes to applying the biblical text. If you don't know any singles well enough to have that sense, it's going to be challenging. And that's true of maybe the widow or the retiree or the young mom. So it's not necessarily specific to singles, but I do think in our context where the family becomes such a point of emphasis when it comes to not just teaching, but even in thinking about, okay, let's talk about application. The first stop for many pastors ends up being, what does this mean for you as a husband or a wife? What does this mean for you as a parent? What does this mean for you? Then they move on typically to the maybe the workforce or maybe as a student in school, but rarely, I think in a lot of contexts, is there a direct, so if you're a single, how does this directly impact you in terms of applying the biblical text? So I think that's one place where I've tried to be an advocate in various contexts to try to say, let's not forget there is this significant demographic that often feels neglected or overlooked or ignored, not just in terms of application from the pulpit, but even in other contexts. If you so structure your church around family, that takes a good thing and actually becomes problematic for these individuals who are single or just don't feel like they fit into that structure.
Yes. I would add, and these are all conversations I think we have had with the church that we go to, the pastoral staff there, so I don't feel guilty sharing any of this or like I'm letting our pastor know new things and,
correct.
And struggles that
our
we
pastors have heard all of these things from both of us at some point.
One of the things that happened in our church was we had a missionary who had been praying for a spouse for years, and the Lord eventually blessed him with a spouse, and praise the Lord for that answered prayer, right?
Yeah.
But it was brought up in service as, oh my goodness, so and so basically has been on this desert island,
right.
nearing death for years,
right.
and all of a sudden, this spouse has come to him, and it has been this life raft. And I'm exaggerating, obviously, but and that caused 6 or 7 of us in church that are single to just kind of find one another after the service. Like, was that weird?
Yeah,
that felt weird.
Right.
And so we did go to our pastoral staff and like, hey, this was communicated. And they were like, oh, yep, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think one other way that, actually, let me frame it as a question. What are what are some ways that your experience in the church has, as a single, been a good thing in that, how have you? What are some things that have been done to make you feel wrapped into not just the life of the church as a whole, so to speak, but even within any sort of family context?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. I think the cure to loneliness is actually community in the church. And so I've experienced that, and that's been a piece of my own, even fighting of sin in my life has been being in homes of people or being with friends, whether it be yourself or I lived with another family from my church when I was in seminary, whoever may be have invited me and made me a part of things. And I will say, as a single person, it is fun to join in the weekly things that happen at a family. What becomes mundane, I imagine, to the husband and wife tandem is exhilarating for the single person. I remember I lived with a family when I was in seminary named the Clothiers, and I went out, and they now live in Pennsylvania. I visited them in Pennsylvania, and just saying, let me take the girls to the store, or let me take them to school, was an exhilarating thing. And being hit in the back of the head with Cheerios as I'm driving down the road was, those things become very exciting for the single person. And so those are ways that I personally have been encouraged by people in the church, just allowing me to be a part of everyday life. So I think that gets after your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for those who are listening who are married or have families, I think there can be I think we would both encourage you to look out for and find ways to bring singles into your family experience. And it can be as simple as having them over for a meal. It can be as simple as, hey, little Johnny's playing in his youth basketball game. Why don't you come join us, and then maybe we'll go grab dinner before or go for ice cream after or something like that. Obviously, holidays potentially can be an opportunity where that specifically comes into play. If a person who is single lives quite a distance maybe from their parents or from their family, to be proactive about inviting them. Hey, why don't you come over to our house for Thanksgiving dinner? Or why don't you come over for Christmas and spend the day with us, since you're so far away from your family?
Yeah, absolutely. Both excellent things.
Well, we need to wrap this discussion up, but what are some any suggestions in terms of reading, where maybe both for the individual who is single, but also these can be helpful things for people who are married and ministry leaders to read, to help them understand the experiences of being single in the church and in our culture.
Yeah, so Sam Alberry had a book come out, I believe, last year called 7 Myths About Singleness, which was originally a Gospel Coalition breakout session that he did. And the audio is actually free online. So I'll post the link to that if you'd rather listen. I think the book is more developed and a little bit more worked out. And then I came across another book a few years ago by maybe one of the better named individuals of our time, Cutter Calloway, which I just love Cutter Calloway.
When I hear that name, I think of...
He sounds like an athlete, doesn't he?
He does. He sounds like a golfer, and he seems like somebody who should have been in Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
As a nemesis to Shooter McGavin. He should have been like the guy who's not good as Shooter McGavin, but Cutter Calloway. What a name.
Check out that hair.
Oh, yeah, he's not messing around.
He's got Johnny Bravo hair.
Yeah.
But Cutter Calloway wrote a book, oh goodness, it's probably 2 years old now, called Breaking the Marriage Idol. Mm-hmm. And while I don't agree with everything he says in here, I think he makes some keen cultural observations about society and those sorts of things and how we have made marriage an idol. And I found his work helpful. Yeah,
and maybe at some point in the podcast we'll cycle back around and talk about marriage as a sort of, not a counterbalance, but as we certainly don't want to give the impression of, well, marriage really isn't a big deal, or it's not that important, or it's not valuable, or it's not a good thing. So, but we got to move on to our athlete. And
we have some disagreement.
I don't know about disagreement.
So episode 5.
Episode 5.
We got to go with number 5.
Yeah, I mean, so a shout out to our, relatively sizable contingent in the great state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. Braxton Miller, a recent wearer of number 5. Obviously not on the same historical significance as others we're about to talk about, but
certainly a very dynamic player on the field.
Incredibly dynamic athlete. So why don't you just go ahead and make your case?
So I'm from the great state of New York, and from Long Island specifically. And on Long Island, there's a baseball team known as the New York Mets. For the last 13 years, the captain, well, not the captain, he became captain in, I think, 2013, but the captain for that team has been, and kind of the figurehead, sort of the poster boy for that team, has been David Wright.
Okay.
Wore number 5, played third base, went to the NLCS in 2006, lost to the Cardinals that I believe went on to win the World Series. Was also grew up a Mets fan, living in Norfolk, Virginia, where his father was a police officer.
Okay.
Mets AAA affiliate was there at one time, and so he grew up rooting for the Mets and then got drafted by the Mets, which is a heartwarming story. In 2014, he got diagnosed with a spinal injury that became a daily struggle, and he was able to play in 2015 38, 39 games, something like that, and led the Mets to the World Series, ultimately losing in 5 games. But he is my choice for number 5.
Okay. So when it comes to other significant number 5s, obviously we've talked about this. In the single digits, you're getting into a good number of Yankees. And
because they have retired every single digit number.
Right.
Yes.
So at one level, I think we at least have to acknowledge Jolton Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah, Joe DiMaggio's huge.
And not even just on the sort of baseball front, but even as a cultural icon, he was a really big deal.
Yes.
So, but in the interest of not picking our third Yankee this early, it's something I don't think we can go with. And quite frankly, the fact that we're picking a third New York athlete is part of what's my hesitation. But let me just say my other.
Okay.
I think the other contender. I'd say if the choice were left solely to me, and it's not because it's not just my podcast, Johnny Bench.
He was an amazing catcher.
The great catcher for the Big Red Machine was in the 70s, would be a historically significant figure. So, but out of deference to my good friend, we can go with David Wright.
Frankly, let's be honest. We're not going to have that many Mets that we name podcast episodes after.
Fair enough.
Because there's not that many good Mets.
Fair enough. So we got to end with our one thing we like this week. You want to go first, or?
Yeah, this morning was announced that Hamilton the Musical is about to be a movie produced by Disney. They recorded a live performance, 3-4 years ago, and have now sold the rights to that movie. Now that people have stopped watching Hamilton or tickets have become affordable, they're going to make the movie and make a whole bunch more money.
Absolutely.
So that's my one thing.
Gotcha. Mine was the meal I had at the Cottage Bar up in Grand Rapids. Had a fantastic burger up there on Saturday. And I'll just point out that I did not partake in any alcoholic beverages while there. But so just to clarify, it was a lunch date with my lovely wife on her birthday. And the burger that I had was apparently voted by USA Today the best burger in the state of Michigan.
Really?
Now, I haven't sampled enough burgers in the state of Michigan to weigh in, but it was a very good. I wouldn't say it was as good as an Oak and Alley burger.
Oh man!
But it's
that was my next question.
It was just a step below. It's all about the quality of the beef you use.
Yeah,
that really is the key there. So, in any case. This has been a strange episode in some ways. We have definitely lived up to our name.
Yeah, we have gone all over the place.
Sundry podcast, and so we have accomplished what we claim to do every week, and covering our various and sundry topics. So until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.